Welcome to the Transformations Podcast. Here, guests and I will share our transformative experiences and will explore how to find excellence in life. We're joined today by Sensei Marcus Davila, a 50-year practitioner and teacher of Judo, Aikido, and Goju-ryu karate. Welcome to the Transformations Podcast, Marcus. It's great to see you again.
Thank you, Mark. Appreciate being here. All right.
Yeah, as I see behind you, our listeners won't be able to see it, but the viewers will. There's a print of Bodhidharma, Dharmo, and also Busaganashi.
Yep.
Would you like to tell us a little bit about those two, their relevance to you as a practitioner and so forth?
Well, the Bodhidharma, I actually got, there was a store in Orlando when I lived there, and it was, name was Bob. He'd been there for years. It was kind of the place for everybody to go. And it was a mecca for martial arts. I mean, it wasn't anything you couldn't find. So anyway, he went to China and he did a tour, and he brought that back. Supposedly it's a bean paste on like rice paper. And then, so yeah, that was real, kind of a little connection for me. And then the Busaganashi, my wife is an artist, so she paints a bunch of stuff for me. And so I asked her to do a painting of that. And so it's an original. She's done some tigers and dragons and whatever I asked her to do, right? But so anyway, yeah, very appreciative for the art.
And I have the exact same Bodhidharma from China on my wall behind me, but there's too much stuff in the way to see, I think. Let me see if I can. Oh, no, you can't see it. It's right behind the things. And Busaganashi, so people who know, Bodhidharma brought Buddhism from India to China.
Yeah.
Sat facing a wall for 10 years and supposedly came up with the I Ching Jing and exercises for the monks, and that started Kung Fu.
Yeah.
And the Busaganashi is the patron saint of Goju, is that correct?
Per se, yeah. He's a fire wind marshal. I don't know exactly the story, but Miyagi was drawn to it and had a copy of it. And so, yeah, so he's kind of our patron saint. Yep.
Oh, wonderful. I'm not as familiar, so it's nice to hear some things. Can you share a little bit about your background? So you have three arts that I know of, Judo, Aikido, and Goju.
Yeah.
And maybe tell us a little bit about what was it in your life that sparked the interest to even start looking at a martial art, and which came first and so on.
Yeah. It was probably the early 70s. My uncle saw a guy working out in the park, Antelope Park in Lincoln, Nebraska. And so he didn't want to go alone, so he dragged me with him.
Nice.
And it happened to be my teacher for 4 decades. But we walked up, said we were interested, and he put us over on the side. He was teaching 2 students. They were green belts, so he had just started teaching in the park for about the last year. Put us over on the side doing head blocks, and we were there about an hour. My uncle said, "Hey, this guy doesn't know anything. Let's move on," right? So we left. So anyway, about 74, I was working at the railroad, and there was a guy said, "Hey, there's a dojo that opened up, right?" And so we went over there, and of course it was my teacher, and he didn't remember me. But I went there for about 3 to 6 months and then quit and went back, and I trained under a couple other people. And then probably 75, I started training and stayed there.
What's your teacher's name?
His name is John Roseberry.
And what's the style of that?
Shorei Shobukan. He studied under Taguchi in Okinawa.
Oh, wonderful.
When it was Shorikan, and then he changed the name. He moved on, and probably in the early 80s. But he was a Golden Glove boxer. He went in the Air Force, went to England, saw a little bit of judo. Then he went into the Marines, and when he was stationed in Okinawa, he started judo again and met Taguchi through some people. And so he was training karate and judo, got to study at the Kodokan in Japan. When he came back, he was in 29 Palms in California and met a Aikido practitioner. So he did those. So in the classes, he taught those all with karate, with the Goju. He thought if you
Mm-hmm.
were, strike, everybody thinks Goju is pretty much a striking art, but he said if you're going to learn how to strike, you need to learn how to throw. And so those were all taught with no rank outside the Goju. He also taught judo, and he always said that he taught judo to support, or taught karate and aikido to support judo. So that was his first love, and
Yeah.
so anyway, that's how we kind of met. So I learned the Goju karate and judo and aikido from him through the classes, and then went on to train with some other people, a little bit of jiu-jitsu. So it's been a good run.
It's been a good run that's still going.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Um, I was talking with Sensei Russ Smith the other day, and he was recently on the podcast, and we met through him.
Mm-hmm.
And he said to ask Marcus about how your teacher expected you to interact between the three arts, or how they were supposed to blend together, or how he wanted them.
Yeah, you know, his his thought was he learned how to box, and then when he got to England and Japan, he said, what's better than being able to hit somebody, but tie him up and then throw him on the ground,
Yeah,
right?
that's right.
And he had some old stories about they go to competitions, you get cheated or the point's not called. So he goes, yeah, they drive him in the mat, they grab the gi, and they give him a little hit, right? And then basically knock him out. And that was kind of the old day thing. It's like, then we know who won. There's no question, right? So if you're getting cheated, so anyway, he integrated him like that. A lot of locks, a lot of throws, sweeps. Um, a lot of the stuff I didn't understand when I was training back then, and I still run him talking the memories and that. And I'm like, oh, that's what he meant. Oh, that's what he meant. Because he'd always say, "Do you understand?" And of course, everybody said, "Yeah, I understand." And it's like,
They don't understand.
no. So, yeah, that's how it kind of got integrated, and I think it just made us more rounded. I mean, a lot of people are
Mm-hmm.
just. I think nowadays you have to. It's kind of like the Chinese. You kick, strike, throw, grapple, however you want to do it. But I think there's certain things that you have to have to. People talk about, well, Goju is not a total system or a pure system. It's like I don't know a system that is. So it's
Right.
they all have other things in them. Wrestling's always existed. Striking's always existed, whether it was a weapon or a hand.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it just kind of makes sense.
Yeah, I have a hard time with finding purity in anything. I mean,
Yeah,
I spent an awful lot of time early on, as a lot of beginners do, and black belts do, where they're trying to, when you love the art and you get into the art and you start researching the art. And back in the day, we only had magazine articles and books, and now you've got the entire world open up on the internet and YouTube.
yeah,
And you're trying to trace what was the original this, the original kata, what original art did this originally come. It's impossible.
yeah,
It's really impossible to say, because it's just human nature that, you know, you have 20 basketball players and they all have a different style, and it's just the arts go that way, and people have break offs from different teachers and start a new thing in a break off, and they study something else.
yeah,
It doesn't invalidate anything. It's just, I think, the nature of people trying to grow and mature in the arts, especially those who really love it and have dedicated their lives to it, to keep on training and growing.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's kind of one of those things. I mean, he had his organization, and he would let us go out and play with other people, but he always wanted us to come back home, and
Right.
would always tell us, maybe you don't need to learn more things. You just need to look at what you have a little bit closer, right? And
Yeah.
it's all here. So
So I would think over the past 5 decades, your eyes have been opened in different ways at different times to
yeah,
that, for those looks.
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. I was uh I was a great follower, and it's kind of the shuhari thing. It's in the beginning, you
Right.
don't know anything, you don't know what you don't know, and then you start asking questions and you kind of get in trouble, and then you want to make it your own, but you don't know how to, so you have to per se learn to learn. And
Mm-hmm.
you just start looking at things a little in a different way. But yeah, there's just so much out there. It's just the biggest thing I probably did for myself was to give myself permission
Yeah.
to look, and to agree to disagree. And I think you said it. Your kung fu is not my kung fu. So
Right.
you move differently. You may be stronger, faster, whatever. And it's interesting. I read about a golfer years ago that I don't know, Arnold Palmer or somebody, a big name like that. And when he retired, he said, I really didn't understand golf until I started playing with my wife. I would play left-handed, to kind of
Mm-hmm.
handicap myself. And he said, I learned things that I never knew. So sometimes you got to look at it from a little different perspective, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's strong and fast when you're in 20s, 30s, 40s, and then you start to slow down. And but yeah, you just have to go back. And a lot of people don't want to go back to square one and learn the kihon, the fundamentals. It's like, I already know all that. It's like, well, maybe you don't.
Right.
But yeah, testing each other, having mentors and friends, people just to uh, I don't know, play the devil's advocate, be the 10th man, kind of 10th man
Mm-hmm.
rule, and it's like, yeah, well, just anyway, it's all good.
It sure is.
Yeah,
I know we all go through phases of learning, of development, of saying, this is no good, this is better, that's no good, and then
yeah,
later we come back and say, wait, that thing was no good, is awesome. That's
yeah,
like the best thing ever, right?
yeah,
You
yeah,
you can't take you know the philosophy of quote unquote picking the best because you don't know, you're not mature enough yet, people,
yeah,
uh, in the first 10 or 20 years even
yeah,
to start, you know, being able to decide what's better than what or what
yeah,
you want to integrate with what, because most people just I find they have a parallel, not a parallel, a horizontal learning, right? I learned this
yeah,
style and then this style and I learned some of this style and this kicks, but there's like the depth in each of the rows is kind of not very deep, or it's deep in one and shallow in the other, so there's not an equal
yeah,
understanding.
yeah,
And that's why I think it's really important to have mentors and teachers.
yeah, yeah,
Even, like you're saying, even if you don't agree with them, but they can still point out things and keep you on the path. And
yeah.
um,
I think sometimes I always think of it as a bar graph, and it's like, well, my physical conditioning's here, but my speed is here, my strength is here, and they're
hmm
just kind of fluctuating all the time as you build everything. So I think it's what do you call it, cumulative, and sometimes we don't realize that. It's kind of like you stay in shape just to so you can train, and you do the maintenance, and when you're hurt, you can still do something. You can meditate, you can, whatever it is to stay in the game per se. So
right,
yeah,
right.
yeah.
Do you mind me asking your age, Marcus? I don't know.
I'm 68 in October.
60.
Yep.
Okay. So I
Yeah.
was going to say, you're in fabulous shape. I mean, and
Yeah.
you look very youthful.
Yeah.
And you were just talking about, you're in shape or your speed or your strength. How have you been able to? Well, first, in your experience, what are the first things, say, after age 50 that start being harder to maintain in martial arts?
Yeah. You
Is it
know,
timing? Is it speed? Strength?
um, yeah, I think it's the structure. If you learn the basics real well, then you can build on them. But if you don't have the
Yeah.
structure, that's what I see. I think a lot of people going back saying that, how come you can move me, or how come you can do this? It's like, um, so I think staying in condition, working on the basics. Um, yeah, I think that's it. And doing a little bit every day. You don't have to do an hour, 2 hours of strength training or anything like that. Just a little bit, a lot is cumulative, and it just keeps you so you can continue to train. Um, you know, as I've gotten older and I'm not as fast or strong, I realize that we train a lot from engagement rather than from moving from a long range, right? So if you're already
Hmm.
engaged, I think about the strategy like this. I can't go get you, so I'm going to have to wait for you to come to me.
Not bad, not bad.
Once we engage, it takes a lot of speed to get move 3 feet, but when we're in close and we're touching, the whole thing changes. So it's not looking anymore because I can't. We're so close, I can't look at you. So we go tactile, and I always say intuitive also. So
Yes.
you're very fast because the range is shorter. So from here to here, it's like boom. I don't have to be fast. I just have to flinch, right? So
Right.
you can start to relax a little bit more. The judo training taught us that too. It's like when you're on the bottom, somebody threw you and they're all over you. He'd say, relax. They're doing all the work, right? So wait till they
Mhm.
make a mistake and then take the advantage. So we do some drills where you close your eyes or blindfold yourself. As long as I have one hand on you, better with two. But I know where everything's at. We're all built the same way. We all move the same way. So uh,
Hmm.
people think, "Oh wow, how did you do that?" It's like, well, just relax. And one of the key things I think I found is through Sensei Russ Smith was he has some drills where you actually listen, right? It's not
Yeah.
what you want to do because maybe the opportunity is not there. So you listen, you wait, and then you go. So anyway,
Hmm.
long,
Yeah.
long explanation, but now I don't know if I really answered anything there, but it just changes your mindset. You know, so I have a thing that I say perception, preference, ability, and intent. And it's just kind of a Venn diagram, or they feed on each other.
Right.
What do you think it is? You know, our beliefs are set on our preferences, how we filter information. Then it goes to some teachers don't teach certain things because they don't have the ability. Maybe they don't kick high. I've never been a high kicker, right?
Yeah.
So it would be pretty worthless for me to get into Taekwondo. And then your intent, because we always hear, is it self defense? Is it uh, self protection? Is it this and that? I think you mentioned one of your podcasts. I'd rather do combative so that I can scale it down rather than do self defense and then I'm not ready. It's like, well, how do I deal with this, right?
Right.
So anyway, just a lot of those things come into play. I'm always researching, studying, and when you find something and you kind of think you have the evidence or the proof, then try and disprove it. Or what's the next best thing
Hmm.
or next better thing? You know,
Right.
yeah.
Right.
Some of the books that you and Sensei Russ have produced on the 5A and that, it's like, oh my gosh, it's just like all Goju. It's
Yeah.
some of the
So it's right
same
there.
some of the sayings and things that we've heard, through time, the Bubishi and all that. It's like it was in 5A hundreds of years ago, right?
Yeah.
They just said it maybe a little bit differently. So I think this is where everybody's gotten their stuff, and of course, everybody tries to don't. My teacher always said, "Don't teach too much too fast because you'll run out of stuff to teach." And I'm like, "There's no way."
Impossible.
Yeah, yeah, there's no way. So anyway,
You only run out of stuff to teach if you're only teaching. Okay, when I was in Taekwondo, okay, 1979, I started, and I was a kid, and we had requirements for yellow belt,
yeah,
green belt, blue belt, and the requirements were like 3 kicks, 3 blocks, two hyungs or katas, right?
yeah,
And then your one-step sparring. So if you teach too fast, you run out of those little units
yeah,
but that's not the art. That's just the tools you need to start applying the art. But we never got to a point
yeah,
where it was always one step, the individual techniques in the air, one step sparring,
yeah,
self defense against grabs, and then sparring, which had nothing to do with the forms or the one steps or the techniques. Like
yeah,
I couldn't rationalize that in my 9-year-old head.
yeah,
Like, how come when we spar we can't do a high rising block reverse punch? It's like
yeah,
the next technique's on me already.
yeah,
And why are we sparring in a way that doesn't resemble the art? same thing when I studied Kempo karate, same thing, you know. So I think it's a problem with the teaching method, and you don't run out of stuff to teach
Yeah.
if you're teaching principles and concepts and theories and things the tools for people to give the students to be able to create their own things rather than just memorize the 12 things for the belt,
Yeah. No, everybody wants to. I mean, the educational system, the teaching system, but you always have a preparatory school,
Right,
whatever. Then you get into general subjects, and then it's specific things. You go to college, you PhD, masters, whatever. So, but nobody wants to do the preparatory. But
right,
so then they get up a ways, a few years down the road, and they quit because they say, "Hey, I can't use this stuff," right?
right,
And but you never built the foundation, and I think a lot of people don't really, it's supposed to be an integrated system, but if you don't have the basics and you don't know the katas, the strategies and things, you see very few people actually applying the katas in the sparring, like you're saying.
right.
And it's kind of like, but I think it's a closer game. I think
Has to be.
you don't see, I'm doing this in the kata, but when I'm engaged, how do I do that? And it's like, you can do it right
Right.
from there, right? So, and there's probably more grappling than striking.
Yeah.
So,
Right. I was going to ask you about that, about the Goju techniques coming in. It's already close, but when you're saying you're coming in closer, tactile sensitivity, it's almost becomes tegumi, right? Or the grappling art.
yeah, yeah. And so, you can look at it. It's kind of like somebody teaches kodagaish, right? And they say, well, this is the
Right.
way to do it. It's like, well, that's prepping you, and you never use it like that. So I've seen people, I've done it. I mean, somebody punches you, you reach out there and try and snatch their hand, and it just never
You
worked,
can't.
right? So,
Yeah. No
but
way.
when you're doing the wrestling to the gumi or whatever, it's like, sometimes you fall into places that you could never get there if you were trying to think, I'm going to put this on him, right? It's like, oh, I got his wrist. All I got to do is twist it, and I got him, right? But
Yeah.
so when I train, I usually I do the 12 katas, the Goju katas, the core ones, and I try and train them all at the same time. So and it takes an hour or two, depending on how many times I stop. But you start seeing the similarities. And it's like, well, this is the same movement, but it's moving forward, same movement moving back, moving off to the line. This is with rotation. So all these things become important. They say, oh, no, it's not. It's like the movement's the same, but the tool on the end may change. So maybe I want to
Right.
grab or I don't want to grab or, so there's all these tactics and things like that. But yeah, it's really about the judo is, you got your entry. It's kind of like bridging, right? And then you got your off balancing. You want to take their balance, and then you can pretty much do anything you want with them. So,
Hmm.
I see it as defense, and then control or counter control, and then
Right.
finish it out. I'm not here to, but boxing teaches that because it has rules. Even the MMA, everybody's got rules, but there's certain things you can't do that when we would go to tournaments, you'd say, okay, you can't sweep, you can't grab, you can't. He goes, half of our arsenal's gone. Have a good time. So,
Right.
so anyway,
Wow.
but
That's great. Now, I think recently I heard that you were working on uh, more, you were spending time on and focusing on foot throws
yeah,
and sweeps and
yeah,
things like that.
yeah,
I'm a big fan of those. I'm not super great these days at them
yeah,
as I was when I was wrestling in high school and doing sweeps and in college and things because I've had a hip replacement. The other hip needs to be replaced.
yeah, right,
Yeah,
yeah,
you work so hard that you break your body down,
yeah,
and now it's like the flexibility and speed there is really hampered. But um, I I interviewed a judo gold medalist Hayward Nishioka some years ago, and he had a book on foot sweeps or foot throws. way back, and I became a big fan. And how are you? Are those just? I guess I don't really know how to phrase it, but generally, are those techniques that were specifically taught to you in one of the three arts, or that you were taking from the concepts of the footwork movements and the kicking movements and the twist turning movements from within the arts?
Yeah.
How is this coming about?
Yeah. I think you have footwork and you have stances. I think that they've always
Right.
been downplayed into these are snapshot positions. What do I do with them? It's like, well, as long as you have the form, but they don't teach you how to use them.
Right.
And they don't teach you footwork is to get out of the way or go get him or, whatever it is, but they don't teach you how to use it. So I think in these stances were more designed, everybody uses the hands, they're hand centric. The bodybuild or most people that work out, they all build the arms and the chest, right? And the legs, my legs.
Tiny little toothpick legs. Yeah.
So, but if you're going to integrate at the top and the bottom, and then the core is your kind of your power. But there's so many opportunities to push and pull and sweep if you know how to use footwork. And it could just be people say you shouldn't pivot on your heel. You should pivot on the ball of your foot. It's like you shouldn't do this. You shouldn't do that. I actually watching Russ Sensei and talk about his weapons teacher, and I said, "Well, what stance am I in?" He goes, "Don't worry about stances. You're either high centered, low centered, forward weighted, back weighted." And it just clicked, and I'm like, all these, and we keep making up more stances. This foot's at 15. Well, that one's at 30. It's like, but what's it for? How do I use it? So
Right.
I went back and realized that I had quite a bit of that stuff already from doing the Aikido and the Judo. And it was a matter of like, how do I off balance? What's the foot? How is the foot structured? How's the knees? How feet and knees are always aligned, and what does all this stuff mean? So one of the secrets was I started watching Kyuzo Mifune, which is he's the judo god, right? And he was a student of Kano. And this guy's just unbelievable. He's got to be like 110 pounds soaking wet, and he's got guys from all over Europe, and they're like 250. And he's just dancing. They can't throw him. He's just floating and just throwing these guys. And it's like, okay, it's the timing, it's the setup. And so one of the reasons I do all the katas is one, if you train it enough so that it's always available to you, you don't have to say, oh, was that? It's like, no, that's in this guy. That okay, he stepped here, I can go here. So I can either throw with my right foot sticking out, and if he blocks that, I'll go with my left foot sticking out because I understand how I structure my balance. So in understanding ourselves, we understand the way other people move. So he's real relaxed, and when you're tight and rigid, it's easy for him to push and pull you off balance. Well, you'll see him lock up. So it's a competition of strength or speed, right? But some of the old guys. My teacher used to talk about, he goes, the real judo players play stand-up judo. It's like, this is where it's at, right? It's not, I'm down and I'm trying to pull and tug and try to throw some trick on you or whatever. It is about technique, so, and how they're put together.
Yeah, you have to find, using the sensitivity, the tactile awareness, the root, where the moment that the opponent's body is off balance, off center, top heavy, bottom heavy. There was an old movie out. I think it was, I forget who was in it. It was called the Judo Saga. I don't know if you've seen it. And black and white. And they had the competition between the judoka and the village. And it was like they're just standing up holding each other for like 20 minutes of the movie, and they're doing time lapses and a little move here, a little tug here, and they couldn't find each other's. They were so good they couldn't find each other's either move each other off balance or find their weakness until the end. One person did a sweep or something, but it shows you how hard that is. And if somebody attacks you, usually if they're not trained or if they're not used to rooting or centering, the weight is in their chest and shoulders and head, so it's
Yeah.
easier to throw them or to take control of their body structure.
Yeah.
But those who are grounded and rooted, like grapplers and wrestlers and judoka, it's really harder to
Yeah.
take them down or unroot them. They seem more like mountains
Yeah.
than
Yeah.
pendulums.
Yeah. A lot of stability and the ability for mobility. I mean, it's stability and mobility, and it's kind of a dynamic thing because it's like San Chin. They say, "Well, I have an immovable stance," and it's like, "Well, that's great, but it's not going to do you a lot of good when you have to move, right? Because you don't
Right,
have the mobility." So,
right,
yeah, it's the interplay of both of them. I think part of it is too. I guess it's the way you train, and um, you know. So my thought is, I have a couple um, things. So one of them is the defense and then counter control. The second one is seal the hands, control the root, break the structure, take the balance, right? So seal their hands. You're
mm,
playing all the weapons, right? You know where everything's at. And then control the root is the feet, like you just said, right? But you have to go from wherever you're at. So once I engage, whether it's this way or that way, it's like, well, I need this technique for that one. So we are usually taught one technique for one circumstance. It's like, well, but what if this
mhm.
happens? It's like, well, then you use this one. And it's like, so now I got 5,000. It's like, what,
Right,
I just ask him, what are you going to do? So I know which technique to use. So if you kind of get in the train as let's engage and then go from where we're at. And, don't ever turn your back. Don't ever do this. Don't ever do that. It's like, well, how am I going to know what to do unless I actually get in that situation? So let your opponent pull you down. It's like, what do I do when I'm down here? It's like, well, there's a leg takedown. I use my hands, right? Or what do I do when he pushes me off balance? Well, I grab onto him and fall with him because he's got to go with me, right? So, there's, I don't know, 50 some, 60 some judo throws. And it's basically, my leg's outside, my leg's inside. Okay, now I'm going the other leg. It's kind of like you were talking about. I'm working the outside gate, the inside gate. What do I have?
right.
The inside's a lot faster, so it can be your friend or your foe. you know, but
Indeed.
you look for things that limit you or help or hinder you. So I think it's just playing is a great. A lot of people get upset. Oh, it's not playing. This is really serious stuff. It's like, but I think play teaches you a lot. Cats play, animals play. But go from where you're at. Get on your back. Get knocked down. Get swept. Um, and one of the most important things I think is having a partner that will feed you consistently, that
Yes.
knows his job. And it's like when you say don't move, that means don't move, right? Or hey, throw a head punch or throw a kick or throw whatever. Let me um, kind of program how this thing works in my mind, and then I can work on it, right? And then kumite for down the road. But we have kakye, like I think you have shishao and some
Hmm.
other things. I think those are just getting to know the body, and it's like a circle. And here's an entry, here's an exit, or here's an entry, here's an exit. Or am I coming left, right? And then you get into a spiral. It's like uh, the body box. Am I just making a circle, which means I'm going this way and that way, lateral, or am I actually
Right,
pushing that power into him and covering the body box? I love
right.
your integrated to scream. It's just like you've done a lot of the work for us. So
Thanks. Hey,
yeah.
steal it, man. Nothing's unique.
Well, and when it comes easy to you, sometimes you don't appreciate it as much until somebody,
Yeah,
the natural athlete versus somebody who really worked for it. And they
yeah,
understand it because they've gotten banged. They learned the lessons where the natural is like, hey, I was fast and quick. Now I'm going to quit because I'm not strong and fast anymore,
right.
whatever. So, yeah,
People like to practice what they're good at, and they really try and stay away from what they're bad at,
yeah,
um,
yeah,
which it's part of the human condition, human nature. I mean,
yeah,
we're just built like that. We want to have gratification and not suffering.
yeah. There's a lot of
uh,
pain.
There's a lot of pain. So, if I can make an assumption based on what we just talked about, you find it necessary to practice skills of interaction with an opponent or a partner rather, not just doing kata, right? The kihon, because why?
Um, so I think that the Kihon and Kata can be practiced pretty much on your own, uh,
Right.
without a partner.
Mm-hmm.
Solo, I guess. We've come up with some things like, here's different phases or levels of training. And uh, you really can't be to the next level until you're able to do this. Do you have the shape and form? Let's
Right.
move on, right? Let's test the structure. So I think it's two part, and that you need to do all the kata training, and I can clean it up or whatever in the fundamentals, so we don't have to waste class time on that. I think class time should be types of kumite. Um, like I said, we started at the engage, so we just come walking at each other, put the hands up, and start moving around both hands. What am I covering? What am I not covering? It's surprising sometimes how I block it this way, but I don't realize his fist is right there, or I actually bring it to me. And so if you have
Right.
somebody, we call it live skills, who sees that, it's like, well, I'm not just going to keep doing it. A lot of people like to do rhythm drills because it feels good, and
Yeah.
there's value in them. But I think it's yeah, I make my entry and I take care of business. So you can't learn that without hands on constantly. And most of the time, you don't even know what you're doing, but you're pushing and pulling. So I think you're programming the body to say, hey, here's pressure. There's no pressure over here. You talked about the light and the dark with one of your Eskrima, and it's like,
Oh,
yeah,
right.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
There's a space here. There's a light here. If I change my energy first, if I do this, if I do that, so
Right.
uh, you're not playing along. You're actually listening and looking, right? And it's hard to do because your mind's doing this like, oh, should I be doing this or should I? It's like, yeah. Now you're deprogramming and reprogramming. So
Oh,
anyway,
right.
yeah. But
Yeah. Do you guys engage, you guys meaning your school, your students, yourself, in Hojo Undo or the
yeah,
resistance training with the different objects?
yeah, absolutely. It's something probably every dojo I've been in. Some of them more than others, but it's kind of like the tradition is taught. I'm going to teach you how to use them, and then it's on you. So that's practice.
Right.
I can help you with it, make up drills, do whatever. I think people get stuck in, this is the Hojo Undo that this master did. So it's like, yeah, but can I improve on that or evolve a little bit?
Right.
Or so, bottom line is, the Chinese, the Okinawan, everybody's got those types of things. It's like, oh, we use this, and that's great. But I think it was just some guy saying, hey, I don't have gold gem weights. So don't pick up this brick or this rock or this log.
Right.
I think that's where a lot of that stuff comes from. I have some stretch bands because I don't have room for 300 pounds of, well, uh, 80 pounds of weight. So, but you can do it, and you just figure out how to do it. How do you push?
Right.
How do you pull? You hook it onto a tree or something. I mean, if you really want to
Hmm.
train, I love the saying, in the space of an ox. It's like,
Ah.
Sensei, I don't have enough room. And it's like, well, I had a one tatami dojo here. I had about 4x6. So that's the way things get changed too. So it explains a little bit about history. It's like, well, it wasn't long enough for us to do 3 reps. So we kept stepping back and going forward, stepping
Right.
back, So I think we get caught up in that traditional thing, which nothing against it. We go back to look at the old, but it's circumstantial to me. It's like, what were their weapons? What was the technologies? What were the,
Right.
there's more crime now than it's like, well, I think there's always been crime. It's just, if uh, anyway, it's just your perception of what it is, right? The three guys with the
Hmm.
elephant, right? Oh, it's long. Oh, it's hairy. Oh, it's fat. It's like, yeah. So
Yeah.
anyway,
I think, looking at the arts, just say in the even not even hundreds of years back, just in the 20s, 30s,
Yeah.
50s, where the training was different than it is now. First thing I always think of is, the guys who created the training or the drills or the katas may not have been the brightest guys in the world. Like, but we don't know,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
there's so many styles and so many katas, like, and then people say like, oh, this guy just made up his kata. Well, the guy whose kata you're doing just made it up too, right?
Yeah.
I mean, so
Yeah.
everybody has to make up or create something of value and use. And, people say, oh, these are the original three from Weichi-ryu and the other three are not traditional. It's like, well, what's the tradition? The tradition is creating. The tradition should be growing and moving with the times,
Yeah.
and evolving the fighting system. And the most thing is that even if we look at basketball players, baseball players, wrestlers, track runners, we couldn't break the minute mile. Now it's like a minute. That's so long.
Yeah.
The sports science, sports medicine, training,
Yeah.
understanding anatomy, physiology, cardiovascular, all that has improved
Yeah.
so far and so much what we know about it,
Yeah.
that there's no reason to be stuck in a tradition.
Yeah.
But I believe in being inspired by that tradition and carrying it forward, but maybe elevating some of the things and adding some more things because they're available.
I totally agree. Totally
They
agree.
weren't available back then.
They were just putting their stuff together. Or they were learning,
Yeah,
they were in teaching and this and that, and something came along that was better. It's like, you go train with your teacher, you don't see him for a year or two, and then the next thing you know, my dojo brothers are telling me, oh, he changed some stuff. And it's like, nah, he didn't change it. Um, I think he just maybe saw another way to do it. And I think all these lineages, it's kind of like when I see differences in a movement in a kata, I ask myself, what is he doing? How's he applying it? Because I think it's just a difference in application, which I love what you said
right.
about I haven't changed anything. It's just the teaching methodology.
That's
It's
it.
like I'm teaching it different. Oh, well, you changed. It's like, no, I'm really not. And in teaching, having a methodology to teach it, you find things that you wouldn't normally find.
Hmm.
If I teach a stance, this is Zenku Sudachi, and this is all it can ever be. It's like, well, how about when I move back from Zenku Sudachi? It's like, well, you move back. It's like, well, but there's a sweep there, or there's a foot movement there, or there's,
That's right.
you really break it down into the details. But then I think a mistake probably a lot of us make over time is that we don't put it back together. So we isolate it. This is how it works, and then we never put it back, and then yeah, it doesn't work.
Yeah,
So yeah,
yeah.
so
In integrated disagreement, people ask me what's different about your style, and I said, well, it's not a style, it's a method.
yeah,
But second, it's the content is the same, right? The content is the same. The strikes, the blocks, the counters, the disarms,
yeah,
but the context in which they're taught, learned, practiced, and applied are different.
yeah,
Same content, different context.
yeah,
And that's what you're saying. Learn to do the things differently and in new ways, and the art just expands outward.
yeah,
It's not a new technique. It's just the context of how you're thinking about and applying, you know,
yeah,
the technique or the stance or the movement is changed.
yeah,
And that's why there's only a problem with this really in martial arts. In music, people, it's all about creating something new all the time, but it's the same scales, right? It's the same chords, but there's a bazillion songs in the world and compositions in the world, but it's the same 88 keys. Like we have 88 movements in martial arts, maybe 100, but we all got to be like, no, it can only be the key of C,
yeah.
you know.
No free expression.
No free expression.
Yeah, I think that's something really important to look at because there's some great or elite athletes, and they have nuances that you'll never be able to copy because they
Yeah,
just don't move like that, or whatever,
right.
or genetics, or whatever it is. So, um, yeah, it's really looking. And I guess that's the Zen and the Tao, and it's like, look, there's really nothing new under the sun. You know, it's already been said, it's already been done. But when you find it on your own and that light bulb goes off, it's kind of like, oh, like a mouse with a shiny little button. It's like, wow, I got this thing, right?
Right.
And then I watched a YouTube video and these, 10 years ago, and this guy was doing it. And I'm like, it's like, it's not you. It's like,
Right.
or when somebody says, "Oh, you must have trained under so and so because you do it," that variation, or just like, no, never met the guy, don't know him. I came up with this on my own. So, the thing we like about people, the authenticity, the originalness, is sometimes taken away because there is none. But,
Right. Right.
we try. But
Right.
anyway,
Hmm. So you said Tao and Zen, and so I'm going to segue a little bit because
yeah.
you're a reader of the Tao Te Ching, correct?
Yes,
Is it
sir.
one of the books that you study?
Yeah, I was excited. Deng Ming Dao.
Yep.
The Living I Ching, and whether into divination or whatever, it's just something to look at. Sometimes I'll just flip the pages like a card deck, right, and just say, okay, what am I
Right.
reading today, right? So it's something new. I don't get in. I'm reading one today. I'm reading two tomorrow. It's kind of like, no, what does this have to say to me? Very well done. Genius work. The
Yeah.
art. So yeah, I love that. Another one that I fell onto was the Kabbalion
Yes.
Hermetic teachings, and
Yep.
kind of blew my mind. Of course, it's like the Tao Te Ching, the I Ching. Nobody knows who wrote them. Oh, this guy wrote them. It's like the Art of War, Sun Tzu. It's like, yeah, the guy never really existed, but it's a compilation of writings
Yeah.
or this or that. But yeah, I think we need that to kind of balance us out, because sometimes we get too much one way, and I don't want to say spiritual, but yeah, look at things from different views. What does it look like from
Hmm.
underneath here? What does it look like from, what is this technique? And that's helped me a lot, actually, the Tao and some of these other books with my martial arts practice, because I'm learning how to look at it from different views. So,
Right.
and it opens up things. It's like, wow, I never thought about that, right? So it may be
Hmm.
one sentence, but yeah, I think you have to be active. I read some stuff about with Suzuki. I can't remember his first name, but on Zen, and
Hmm.
it was kind of like I worked with a guy that was an alcoholic, and so he was going to AA, and there's a story of a Zen master, and he's got a student, and the student's sitting there, and he said, "What are you practicing on?" He goes, "I'm working on my anger." And so a couple minutes later, he comes by and slaps him in the head. And you've probably heard the story. And the guy's like, "Hey, what are you doing? This and that." And he goes, "Oh, I thought you were working on anger." He goes, "The time to work on anger is when you're angry, not when you're meditating, right?" So
Right.
you got to take your meditation with you and say, "Why am I feeling like that? What did and it goes into colors and everything else. I think I see all your books and all the
Yeah.
flags
Yeah.
and the pennants. And it's like, for some reason, those colors, that stuff makes us feel comfortable, right? So when we go somewhere that we're not comfortable, it's kind of like, yeah, I got my stuff with me, right? It's like,
I
relax,
know. I
relax.
know.
Yeah. So, and it teaches us things about other people, how they live, how they see things, and we're about as divided from the Asian thought, the Western Asian are just like, sometimes we just don't get it, and sometimes they don't get it, right? So
Hmm.
it's tough, But I think, like in a community of practice, you need different views. You need, you need to be challenged. You need to be, and we'll laugh, and I'll say, "Oh, that's blasphemy," or that's BS, or whatever, and I have to process it for a week or two or a month, and then come back and say, you know what, I don't want to say you're right, but you're right.
Wrong.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, you have to
Yeah.
find people or a group. Yeah, it really
Yeah.
helps. And you definitely need a training partner that you can trust. And, pretty much everything is based on the trust. It's like the Dunbar number of groups, 150, 50. It's like, yeah, usually you have a few close friends, and those are the ones. And then you kind of, your circle of influence, you got to have people you trust to give you, good information, but you also have to research it for yourself. So nothing's in stone. So
Yeah.
I think that's what the Tao and the Art of War and some of that, it's like these guys just trying to figure stuff out, right?
Right.
Yeah.
The Yellow Emperor's Classic of Chinese Medicine is another book that was a compilation of many writers, and they just ascribe it to a Yellow Emperor's Classic. I'm a big believer in, and people laugh at me. It's okay. Well, I don't care anymore what people think, so
Yeah, exactly.
carry myself and do my. I'm just a guy doing this thing,
Yeah.
but I believe in divination, right? I believe in psychic abilities. I believe in fortune telling.
Yeah.
And the reason I believe in it is because a lot of people will say, oh, psychics are fake. They'll say this, here's a paragraph, and it can relate to everybody who reads it. It's so generic. But the fact that it relates to everybody differently means that there's a meaning for everybody, right? So when you pull your jaw stick, your fortune telling stick, or throw your I Ching coins, and you get your thing, or the fortune teller tells you something, it's an outside force or energy person telling you something for you to reflect on.
Yeah.
Right? I don't believe it as you're going to have $100,000 on Wednesday type of thing. But the fact that they're saying things that are generic, but you can find meaning in them, gives you something to think about in terms of your life that you may not have thought about.
I love that. I mean, I believe that they're being used as a conduit. I kind of see it as
Right.
a radio. And like maybe you can't turn into this station, right? Or maybe you're not listening. A lot of times,
Right.
I look at prayer and meditation. Prayer, I believe, in my
Yeah.
is you're always asking. I need something. Meditation is like, hey, what do I need? Or hey, point me in a direction or something like that. So,
Right.
and I think that there are conduits and there are people. I might read a couple words, and something you didn't think about, or it comes in a way that you're not ready for it. You go somewhere. It's kind of like the old movies where they got the monks sweeping, and it's like I'm after in line. Like when I'm stretching or doing kata or exercise or working in the yard, it's whatever you want it to be. I mean, I'm bending, I'm lifting, I'm pushing and pulling, but I'm not sometimes cognitively aware of it. It's like, no, this is exercise. What'd you do? I just lifted 50 logs. I did 50 curls, but you do it a certain way, right? But yeah, I won't go into too deep, but yeah, it's definitely tuning in. And there's a saying that I heard a long time ago, and I just from an older lady. She said, "Naked in a cornfield," and I'm like, "What are you talking about?" And she's like, "You should be able to do whatever you do. You don't need props. You don't need this. You don't need
Right.
that." She goes, when you go somewhere, you take it with you. You take all your baggage. You say, "Hey, I'm going to get away for a weekend. I'm stressed out." It's like, well, you take that stress with you. So,
Right.
but yeah, it's just the way our minds work. But absolutely, yeah, it's good stuff. So I'll just say this real quick, but if you read any of these things, it's always about change, right?
Yep.
And being able to adapt. And if so if you can't change and you can't adapt, you're just living in
The oak versus the weeping willow, right? I mean, or the reed. You just get
yeah,
blown over and crack and
yeah.
rot. You need to be flexible in your mind.
Yeah, and you step in, it goes into I mean, it permeates everything at different levels, and that's kind of what the Kabbalion's about. It's like vibration and rhythms, and it's like, feel it, listen to it, change with it, see what it has to offer. Yeah, you don't like green beans, eat them. You might like them. I don't
Right.
know.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. I look at things like, I mean, my room here, I have my books, banners for martial arts, swords. Over here, weapons rack, I have an altar, all kinds of things,
uh,
right? So for me, this is a sacred space. And when I walk through the door to come in, it's spiritual for me. It's like I'm leaving the profane, entering the sacred. And if I put on a uniform, I mean, I'm in this space. I'm in a different time, different universe, different whatever. And then you start training, and you're doing movements that were created well before you were born, like before your grandparents were born, right? Like whatever it is, things that were used in wars or developed because of war and raids, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, for me, the colors in the wound, the equipment, the weapons, the altar, the incense, the uniform,
Yeah.
none of that's necessary to practice martial arts,
No.
But for me, it's like a permission slip, or to be part of an older culture or tradition that would lineage that was there 1,000 years before me,
Yeah.
to connect spiritually.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I think I love the way you put it. I think it's preparation. You go get your water, you put your uniform on, you tie your belt, a certain, it's just
Right.
preparing the mind to do something. And the biggest thing I found, and I've always done it, but I didn't realize I'd done it until somebody approached me about it. But when you're doing something and you lose time,
Oh yeah.
something happens with your eyes, right? Like you're just zeroed in, but you're not. It's that 1,000-yard stare or whatever it is. And they talk about, right, opening the wide eyes, the bahi, pointed, chin tuck.
Mm-hmm.
Those are, I think, some of those things we do naturally. But yeah, it's just a preparation to go to work. And it's kind of like when I sit and meditate. Sometimes I can't sit. Sometimes they're standing meditate.
Yeah.
That's why I say, it's just putting yourself in there. And then I think you mentioned that on one of your podcasts. It's like, man, everything feels so good. There's just bliss, and and then you think about it, and it's gone. It's like
Right.
like smoke. So you're kind of lifting the
As the
veil, right?
cognitive mind enters, you come out of that spirit realm.
Yeah,
When you're meditating and you don't, or you're doing a kata and you're in the kata,
yeah,
you don't know that, somebody walked in the room,
yeah.
because you're there, you're in this other space.
It's like a hyper
And then,
focus, right?
yeah.
Yeah,
And when you're meditating or practicing qigong, I find that when I use my cognitive mind to examine something, I've come out of that space.
right.
It pulls me out, So you can use mindfulness and cognition to get you into the space,
Right.
but then you have to let it go and just merge with that.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I think it's doing something, whether it's twiddling your thumbs, whether it's sweeping or whatever. Just go out there and don't be mad about having to do it, or hey, I got to get this done or whatever. It's just it's personal
yeah,
time, and I'm very fortunate because my wife, I'll start pacing like a caged animal. And you need to go work out. I'm like, what? She's like, yeah, you need to go train. And I think
go
it
mow
makes
the
me.
lawn.
I think it makes me a better person, and those endorphins, and it makes you feel better. So since I've
Right.
retired, I've tried to do a little stretching out and working out in the mornings, and it sets your whole day.
Your
So,
school is called the Kokonden. Is that how you pronounce it?
Kokonden, the transmission of old and new traditions. So Ko is old,
Nice.
yeah. And I was looking for something besides Khan or another. Yeah, it's kind of like you say. I'm not doing what they're doing,
Right.
and it is. I totally agree. It is something that has become sacred to me. Per se, my religion. So,
Right.
and so I don't. Uh, you drop the pearls or you drop the nuggets. That's the best I can do. If you pick it up and come back, that's great. If it's still laying there, it's like, don't come back because you didn't do what I told you. My teacher used to say there was a kid who always blocked like this, and he was teaching this. And he said, hey, how come I can't make black belt? And he goes, because you're still blocking like this. And he goes, well, that's the way I like to block. He goes, well, then you're wasting your time and mine. You already know how you want to do it. Don't come back.
Right.
Right.
What do you need me for?
And I'm like, wow, that was harsh. And then later on, it's kind of like, yeah, he was right.
Right.
But Yeah, and people, not to be negative, but some people need help. Some people don't need it. They just are like, they cling and they just want to come and get it out of your head and spew it somewhere else, but they really don't understand it. Not that I understand anything, but my training, my research, what I do with Sensei Russ at the BurnCon is very important and serious to me, and we have a lot of fun doing it. But it's not for everybody, you know.
Right.
You know, it's just our way of
Well,
doing it. So,
if you're trying to teach principles, theories, applications, physics, scenarios, it's really hard to have a commercial school.
yeah,
I'm fortunate that my Goon is attached to my house. The Burinkan is attached to Sensei Russ's house, or couldn't afford to keep it open.
yeah,
But it's there for the transmission is available to those who are serious and want to seek it out.
yeah.
But we don't have to pander in order to pay the electric bill.
Yeah, I think that's a huge thing. The overhead, there's so much out there that it's like a smorgasbord, and you can go pick. And I can't say it's a bad thing. I do it, and so most of the time I don't even know what I'm looking for, but I'll see something, I'll say, "Oh, there's a little nugget, right, that I got."
Yeah,
But I think getting past trying to do it, I'm going to say this, but I think the days of the big organizations are over.
yeah,
So it's a good thought, but once you get in there and people, they want to participate sometimes for their own agendas and, no, we're brothers. It's like, well, a real brother is a brother 724. A real friend is a friend 724, not just when you feel like it or when you have. So, yeah, I think it has to become personal. And there are some things that probably shouldn't be taught because if they get in the wrong hands, I mean, I get what they were saying way back when. Um, and so, yeah, I think it's going to be small groups and little groups like
yeah.
this. And, it's funny because when we went to Okinawa back in '94, we visited a lot of dojos. A lot of people were very open. And it was like, oh, do you have an introduction letter, or do you have a? And it's like, so it's very important when somebody brings somebody to me. It's like you vetted him, right? He's not going to go crazy on me, or he's not going to, It's like, so you're responsible for him, right? To bring him, and you know who I am. So are we gonna? So I think it's good to have a kind of an interview or something like that. I know a lot of people poo-poo them. It's like, oh no, we gotta pay the bills. Whoever comes in the door. So I think that's where it starts to go kind of south a little bit, you know.
Yeah.
But
I'm going to share something that I believe, and I'd like you to comment on it. I don't believe in worshiping idols, okay, but I have statues and little ones and big ones all around and paintings, right? So Bodhidharma, you have Busaganashi, people of Jesus and Buddha. I take a different view of all of that, and I say when I see Bodhidharma on the wall, Dhammo, or I'm looking at a Buddha statue that I have, that statue is to remind me of the Buddha nature within me. I'm
yeah,
not praying to Buddha as an outside thing or asking for help. I'm trying to reflect on the Buddha nature with me, the Christ nature within me. Aside from it just being an inspiration, to have Busaganashi or Damo on the wall. Do you look at those just as inspiration, or to kind of fill in the space, like you're in the space of martial life, or
yeah,
do you look at them as kind of something to spark something, or to recognize a piece within you?
yeah. I think they're reminders. It's like I have pictures of the masters, my some of my
Right.
family that are deceased or whatever. I think
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of gets you in the mindset of we always talk about developing character and this and that, and it's like, well, it's real hard to do in a dojo or anywhere else. Even the churches or whatever you want to call them, synagogues. But yeah, I think it's to remind us of concepts, the way we want to live. Um, sometimes seeing a picture, it's kind of like those pictures where the eyes move, right, and they follow
Yeah,
you in the
yeah.
room.
They're all
It's that
following.
preparation again. By seeing them, people leave fruit. I'll put flowers, burn a candle. I mean, we have
Yeah,
some kind of weird stuff that we do, but we'll call the Druids or the pagan. Oh, that's not what were they doing? It's like, but then other ones. So sometimes we don't look at ourselves; we look at others. But I think it makes me feel a little bit better when I see that type of thing because I think, okay, they have moral character, or they're trying to live an ethical life, or and I don't want to judge, and uh, I don't know what ethics and moral is, but I know the way I think about them. But I think those things are important. The traditions and that, yeah. Sometimes the rituals get a little. It's not about it's naked in a cornfield. It's like I don't need all that stuff. But seeing them, it reminds me of things. It makes me feel good. It makes me think I have a direction that guide my thoughts, words, and actions. I mean,
hmm,
always be mindful of these things. And so those things remind me because they're kind of like disciplinarians. You're like, hey, don't be like that. Be like this. So
yeah.
you can choose who you want to hang out with.
If you had to do it all over again, would you get back? Would you do martial arts again?
Yeah, absolutely. I mentioned Mifune. There's a guy, Soji Nishio, the Aikido guy. Yeah, I probably would have lived over in the Orient. I would have been a Don Drager, somebody
Right,
like that, and without the poison thing.
right.
Yeah, absolutely. I've always been. I feel it's kind of a joke with some of my friends, but I'm an introvert, and introverts always get adopted because they're quiet and they just kind of go along. So I got to see a lot of things. I've had a lot of mentors. Even through the Tao and things like that. Even your biggest nemesis is a mentor. Learn
Absolutely.
what you'd like to do or what you don't want to do, or whatever. But yeah, I think you just have to have an open mind. And I'm kind of like you. I'm not there yet. In my mind, I say, yeah, I don't care what you think. you know,
Right.
and I give myself permission to be me and self worth. There's just so much pain in the world if you can help somebody, but you have to be healthy first before you can help somebody else. And so
Yeah.
take care of yourself. And I think, yeah, the physical, the mental, the spiritual, they definitely knew what they were talking about. And, the Shinto religions in Okinawa, Japan, it's like they got thousands of gods, India, thousands of gods. And it's like, but they have meaning. It's kind of like an ethics course. What was this guy? Oh, he killed people. He was a reaper, right? Oh, what about this
Right.
guy? This guy's all about love.
I have two things I like to say. One is when you have all those gods, the more like patron saints, right?
Yeah,
The patron saint of farming, the patron saint for rain, the patron saint for war, you know. And the second thing is like they're all reflections of different parts of ourselves,
yeah.
Or, you know, we could list everything we do and have 1,000 things. I'm a man. I'm a this tall. I'm a karate guy. I'm a kung fu guy. I like to cook. I'm a father. I'm a husband. I'm a banker. I drive a car. It's like they have a God for all of it because I think it like just shows how much there is out there to relate to and what is within us because we're made of the same stuff as the entire universe.
Well, I love the gacho and the maste. It's like the same fabric, the same spirit, the same. We're all cut from the same cloth, and so yeah, it's like just be kind, be courteous. Like it's not hard.
And I'd
You
like to ask one more question before we close.
What's
How do
that?
you think the arts and the spiritual, religious, philosophical pieces of the arts can transform others?
Well, my teacher opened up the first dojo. There was a lot of people there. They didn't have a place to train, or they wouldn't have had him. We were into getting in trouble and stuff. So he had gotten in trouble. He'd been in the Marines, a drill instructor, this and that. So he was used to dealing with younger people, but we kind of lost the family unit in our communities. As far as, I had an uncle that took me fishing. I had another one that did this. My dad wasn't always around because he was working 3 jobs. My mom was working. So we had people who, it's like a boys and girls club, right, or a recreation center. We had somewhere to go. They were our babysitters, and so he was more like a father, like a second father, and he was always talking about, hey, don't do this, learning to guide without interfering, right? I don't eat the same food as you, or I don't believe the same as you, and so I think it helped develop our character. And karate was, character, be straight. So I think, yes, I would go back and do it again. I would recommend it to. They've taken a lot of the physical education out of the schools, out of this and that. And I think that was a big,
Yeah.
yeah. Wrestling clubs, judo clubs. I try to support locally. I think you start supporting local, and then you can kind of move out with your circle of influence, give back to the community. Yeah, I think the martial arts is a good thing. It's hard to find good teachers,
Yes.
but it's also hard to find good students. Martial arts is probably one of the missing links. You need to
Yeah.
have self-worth. You need to feel like you can take care of yourself, like you can do for yourself. And I think it's kind of like the Boy Scouts, right? You need a badge for this. You need a rank for this. You need a, you know, but it's a total system, and you can't just pick and choose the way you want, or you don't get it.
I want to
So,
thank you for taking time out of your afternoon to
yeah,
spend here with me and our audience chatting,
yeah,
sharing your 50 years of experience and wisdom with us.
yeah. I appreciate it. Thank you for inviting me. I really love your big fan of your Transformations podcast, and you've had
Thank
some
you.
great people on there. I listen to them, and it's just it's a good thing. So I hope you keep on doing it, and I hope people support you. So
Thank
please
you. We
let us know how we can support you, because sometimes
yes.
I think yeah, you don't
We
know.
need subscriptions. It's free to subscribe, of course. We need people to hit the subscription bell on YouTube or on Audible, iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, Amazon, Spotify. It's everywhere. But hit the subscribe button, like, share, post it up, and tell your followers and friends about it. The more people we get in, then more I'm able to do more and more things and keep it going.
Yeah.
So we appreciate all the support we've been getting. It's been great so far, and I'm so happy to have you on today, Sensei Marcus Davila. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you, Mark. All right. Response.